Hey, folks, Eric Stacklebeck. Welcome to a Watchman Newscast live stream. It is almost December. Hard to believe. We are starting the week with some major breaking news. Obviously, it was Thanksgiving here in the United States, so it was a bit slow over the past few days, slower than usual here on the newscast. Of course, we usually try to come to you at least from Monday through Friday. And during the war, of course, over the past 6, 7 weeks, we've been coming practically every day, but we've got a lot to catch up on. And number one, the big story, obviously, is the continuing truce between Israel and Hamas as Israeli hostages continue to be released from Gaza, from the clutches of Hamas terrorists, back into Israel. And Israel, likewise, is releasing Palestinian, not hostages, Palestinian prisoners, people who've been imprisoned in Israel and convicted mostly on terrorism charges. So it's not like, well, I heard some people say, well, they're all hostages. It's a hostage exchange. No, it's not. The Israelis, the women, the children, the elderly who are being released were brutally taken captive by terrorists and dragged into the bowels of hell, into the tunnels beneath Gaza. Whereas, again, these Palestinians that are being released as part of this truce, temporary truce between Israel and Hamas, were imprisoned on terrorism charges. They're not victims. The Israeli hostages are victims who are being released back into Israel. I shouldn't have to even say that, folks, but we live in times when common sense is not so common. And the narrative, and you've seen it, including in some quarters of the mainstream media, is that this is some equal exchange, and the Palestinians being released from Israeli prisons were also victims and quote unquote hostages in all of this. Obviously, it could not be further from the truth. And yet I see in the West Bank, which we call Judea and Samaria, jubilant greetings from Palestinian civilians greeting these released convicted terrorists who were released from Israeli jails. Very telling, I believe. But it does seem that this truce will now be extended for at least 2 more days. Remember, this was supposed to be a 4-day, essentially a ceasefire, right? Where hostages are returned to Israel and Palestinian prisoners are released, and Israel agrees to hold its fire for at least 4 days. Well, today, Monday, November 27th, is day 4. And Hamas, we knew, folks, over the past few days that Hamas leaders were clamoring to extend this truce. And listen, they would like to extend it as long as possible and build momentum for a permanent ceasefire. The more the guns are silent, the more the world is going to say, hey, you know what? Why don't we just make this truce permanent? A permanent ceasefire. No one's been firing. Even the North has been quiet with Hezbollah during this truce. The South, by the way, is another story entirely. Wait till you hear what the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen have been up to and why I believe Israel may be forced to respond. More on that in a minute. But you can see some quarters of the so-called international community already saying, hey, this peace and quiet over the past 4 days has been pretty nice. You know what, Israel, let bygones be bygones. You've eliminated enough Hamas commanders. They've gotten the memo. They've received the message. They know not to do it again. They won't duplicate October 7th. That's really the thinking among some influential quarters, especially here in the West, where I'm sitting right now, always ready to appease. And they don't have any long-term answers for the Hezbollah threat to the north, by the way, which is still every bit as strong as it was before October 7th, despite some 90, at least reportedly, Hezbollah terrorists being killed in these border exchanges with the IDF. But anyone who thinks that Hamas will not seek to duplicate October 7th and that demonic carnage many times over, if they're left to fight another day, is delusional. Why do I say that? It's not, well, that's Stacklebeck's opinion. No, top Hamas officials have said it plainly on the record. And we showed a clip on a recent live stream by one Hamas official. I believe he was appearing on Lebanese TV. And he said, yes, we want to carry out many more October 7th and kill many more Jews. They're on record saying it. And folks, if the 20th century, not to mention the 21st, but the 20th century especially, right? We're talking about in recent memory, you're relatively recent. You're talking Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Saddam, Pol Pot, the North Korean dictatorship, etc., Castro. If that century, which gave birth to all of these demonic tyrants, taught us anything, it's that when evil men tell you they want to kill you, you should take them very seriously, and you should take them at their word, and you should prepare accordingly. Hamas leaders told us before October 7th what they wanted to do. The Iranian regime has been telling us, Hezbollah has been telling us, the Houthis in Yemen have been telling us for years that they want to wipe Israel off the map. And by the way, they're not very fond of the United States, who they consider the great Satan either. When evil men tell you they want to kill you, take them at their word. Don't believe them on anything else, but when it comes to that, they usually mean business. And on October 7th, it was proven that deterrence with these genocidal demonic forces does not work. And if anyone out there thinks, well, Israel has done enough. They've bombarded Hamas. They've killed a lot of those Hamas leaders. They've gotten at least 58 hostages back. More on that in a minute. The current state of affairs with the hostages, who's returned and what comes next. I'll break that down in a second for you. And they've weakened Hamas. And look, they destroyed the tunnel network largely in the north. They rooted out the tunnels beneath Al-Shifa Hospital and that whole system. Israel, you've done enough. No. Folks, the goal of this operation, rightly so, for the IDF and the stated goal of Israel's political leadership is to crush Hamas once and for all decisively so that Hamas can never, ever pose a threat towards the state of Israel again. I ask you, there have been reportedly probably 4,000 Hamas fighters killed since October 7th. There are also reportedly between 20 and 30,000 still alive and kicking, in hiding right now largely. But you still have tens of thousands of Hamas jihadists and the top echelon of Hamas's leadership alive and functioning. Does anyone watching right now, and I'd love to hear your comments, and we've got a very lively chat right now. We've got thousands of people with us. Before we're done, we'll have thousands more. Does anyone watching right now really believe that if Israel were to call today right now permanent ceasefire, that Hamas would suddenly lie dormant and would hold its fire and change its spots? The jihadist leopard would suddenly change its spots. And Hamas would say, you know what? Jihad doesn't work. We shouldn't have done this. You know what? October 7th, we regret it. And we're going to change our ways. We're going to get about the business of governing Gaza and being good stewards. Come on. Does anyone watching really believe that? Or would the lesson taken by Hamas and by extension, Hamas's masters in Tehran, the Iranian regime, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah, the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and by extension, Russia, China, North Korea, other rogue regimes, would the message they'd received by a premature ceasefire be more of a message of empowerment and emboldening, where they say it worked? Israel backed down. Israel climbed down. They stood down and they caved to the pressure. And by the way, as an American, folks, I can tell you that by extension, it would not just be Israel, which would be labeled weak by its enemies if it agrees to a premature ceasefire with the stated goal not finished. The United States would also be seen as weak. In the Western world, Europe is usually seen as not having teeth behind any proclamations or declarations. But the world will know that it was the Biden administration and the United States that pressured Israel relentlessly to agree to a ceasefire. People aren't stupid. They may be wicked, these forces Israel is fighting against for its very existence, but they're not stupid. They're cunning, and they'll smell weakness. And they'll say, yes, Israel is weak, but it was the United States, which is a paper tiger, which put them up to this. So the U.S. is also weak. And what does that mean? Take a few guesses. We have a very educated, well-informed audience, and it's a pleasure and a joy and a privilege to come to you every single day here. But it will invite more attacks. There's an old saying that really applies today more than ever. Weak men create hard times. Wow, if that ain't true. So needless to say, I believe Israel will not agree to a premature ceasefire, but I do believe that there is a good chance they will extend this current truce. Now, today's the fourth day, as I mentioned a minute ago, and there are rumblings that it may be extended 2 days. Here's what we know so far. I'm going to read you some just straight off my phone here. Pardon me for looking down, but here's the latest in terms of numbers, who's been released, and what exactly we have, just so you know, over the past 4 days. The Israeli military said this evening that Monday evening, their time, 11 hostages were released today. Monday, November 27th. They were handed over to the Red Cross in Gaza, made their way into Israeli territory. So far, Hamas has released 58 hostages. That's since Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. And Hamas, by the way, has been playing games, folks. Hesitating and delaying the releases. There's been a lot going on behind the scenes that's been infuriating for Israel and for the families. So it's psychological warfare on the part of Hamas. But they've released 58 hostages, including 39 Israelis. Remember, not all of the hostages taken, there were some 240, were Israeli. There were Thai nationals, people from Thailand, guest workers, and people of other nationalities also killed on October 7th, as well as taken hostage, including some U.S. citizens, many dual citizens as well, dual Israeli. One young girl, a 9-year-old girl, released the other day, was a dual Israeli-Irish citizen. So we've got that as well. But Israel, so 58 hostages, including 39 Israelis released. Israel has released some 117 Palestinian prisoners, keyword there, prisoners, and 30 minors among these Palestinians released, 30 minors and 3 women. Now, the Israelis released from Gaza today, folks, include 3, I mentioned that dual citizenship, 3 dual French citizens, 2 dual German citizens, and 6 from Argentina, all, again, dual Israeli citizens, all released today. And we'll see what that means for the next 2 days, because Hamas has said that for every day this is extended, and I believe there's some 175 still in captivity right now. After the past 4 days, there were 240. Apparently, according to Hamas, for each day this truce is extended, Hamas will release 10 more hostages. We shall see. But you can see what they're going to do, folks. Israel's in a very, very tough position, needless to say. And yes, 175 hostages still being held. And many children and women being held. Although Hamas, again, I said it's psychological warfare. They're playing games with lives. The one family was split up. One young girl, I believe she was 12 years old, was separated from her mother. Part of the agreement between Israel and Hamas was that, and brokered by Qatar and the U.S. involved there, was that no mothers would be separated from their children. And yet, that's exactly what Hamas did. They separated a mother and her child. So I do have a praise report when it comes to this, though. You have seen, hey, look, this is a tough position, folks. We can go around and around whether Israel should do this, agree to this truce. There's very strong feelings. And I have to say, on the part of our commenters, the consensus, I would say, has been don't do the deal. Don't do the ceasefire. Don't do the truce. I asked you, hey, everyone, what do you think? And just reading our chat here in the comments, people say, don't let up, don't stop. It's war. Israel's in a tough position. But I will say, regardless of what you think, and we've interviewed, you've seen here on the newscast, we have interviewed many families of the hostages. Folks, these are the most gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching interviews I've ever done. But I do have a praise report. You may remember the one family, and this was the worst interview I did, worst in terms of, from an emotional standpoint, how to even ask questions of this poor guy, Avichai Brodach, about 40 years old, I believe. His wife and his 3 children were all kidnapped and taken into Gaza. His wife's 40, his daughter, 10 years old, 2 sons, 8 and 4. 10, 8, and 4, and his wife. And I'm trying to interview this guy. What do you even ask? What can you say except, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through. I'm praying for you. That's all you can say. But he was resilient. But his daughter was taken October 7th on her 10th birthday. He still had the birthday cake in the fridge. They were going to celebrate that day, and here she was snatched out of her bed. I say all that to say they've been released. And it's an answer to prayer. Thank God. They've been released, and they will be reunited with their dad, who we interviewed here on The Watchmen. So I know the downsides of the deal, and we've talked about them. We'll talk a bit more today about, look, the IDF losing momentum here, Hamas having time to regroup and possibly even escape Gaza, some Hamas leaders. There's international pressure builds, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Well, let's make this ceasefire permanent again, and on. But you know what? Then you have this too, where this family's been reunited against all odds. So just keep it in prayer, folks. Pray for wisdom and discernment for Israel's leaders right now, because they need it. And they need to call on the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I hope they're doing that right now for wisdom, direction, discernment. He will make their path straight in some very difficult decision-making. Arguably, it's at the top there among the most difficult periods and decisions made since 1948, since Israel was miraculously reborn. But this family has been reunited. So that is, no matter what you think of this truce, and I know the downside, and I know the upside is this, that families are reunited, and families and little kids are escaping from the bowels of hell in Gaza and Hamas captivity. So it's a very, very tough situation, and just keep in prayer. Pray for these families. Pray for the families still being held. Pray for Israel's leaders to have that wisdom to do what's right, and to lean on the God of Israel again, to show the way, and to cry out to him. God, what do we do? Sometimes that's what, in our personal lives too, right? God, help me. What do I do? And he might not say, Eric, do this, but he'll show you. He'll show you the way. He'll make your path straight. He'll give you peace. He'll give you discernment. He'll do that for you individually. He'll do it for leaders. He'll do it for governments. All you got to do is ask and cry out to him with a humble heart. And in the meantime, we will continue to intercede for Israel and Israel's leaders. But that is the state of play, so to speak. And what do you think? Does Israel extend this 2 more days? Folks, I got to tell you, if you extend it 2 more days, that's basically a week. That'll be 6 days. That's essentially a full week of Israel pausing what had been a very successful operation in Gaza that was gaining a lot of momentum. Hamas was on its heels and on the ropes. And you have to think that Hamas terrorists have been using these past several days to regroup, to retreat, to rearm, et cetera, when this ground invasion recommences. And look, Israel's leaders have said throughout, this is not the end. Yes, we have this temporary truce, but we are going to finish this job. And I trust them, and God willing, they're going to stick to their word. Political and military leaders, they're saying, look, it ain't over. We're going to finish this job. Assuming they're going to do that and stick to their guns, literally, and keep their word, which I believe they will. I think the people of Israel demand it after what happened October 7th. If this current coalition goes wobbly, they're out. And Bibi's out. And he knows that. If he goes wobbly on this, the people of Israel want justice for what was done. And this is an evil demonic force which will regroup and attack again if Israel lets up. They must be destroyed, Hamas. There's no other way about it. But when Israel, again, restarts that offensive, know now that although Israel has largely pacified northern Gaza and the Gaza City area, still mopping up for sure, the fight will now move to central Gaza and mainly southern Gaza, Khan Yunis, the second largest city in the Strip, and Rafah, around that Rafah crossing. Look at Rafah, look at Khan Yunis, and reportedly a good deal of Hamas's senior leadership in Gaza may be in Khan Yunis in, surprise, surprise, fortified bunkers and tunnels beneath Khan Yunis. That's the next phase here, folks, that you have to look towards. Maybe we have 2 more days and 20 more hostages perhaps released. We shall see, but that is the next stage, southern Gaza. And we haven't even discussed Hezbollah and what is to come there. Avigdor Lieberman, who was a part of this coalition, he's the leader of the Yisrael Beitenu party, who's been a critic of Benjamin Netanyahu. He once worked for him. Now they don't get along. He said today, and he's a former defense minister, he said, look, Hezbollah and the Houthis have had free reign, essentially. I wouldn't agree with that when it comes to Hezbollah. Look, Israel has struck back hard against Hezbollah. As I mentioned earlier in this live stream, at least 90 Hezbollah terrorists have been killed. But there is the day of reckoning coming to the north, no doubt, where Israel eventually is going to have to eliminate the Hezbollah threat as well. There's no way around it. The situation to the north, 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel, unsustainable. Lieberman said, look, Israel, the IDF needs to push Hezbollah back behind the Litani River in southern Lebanon. And folks, that takes ground forces, that takes a major operation. If you're going to go that far, you might as well destroy Hezbollah once and for all, like you're doing to Hamas. Ultimately, that is the answer. But the Houthis in Yemen, he also mentioned the Houthis. And I have some very important updates about the Houthis. Again, I mentioned Hezbollah has, although they weren't part of these ceasefire talks, Hezbollah to the north has observed this ceasefire, and they've held their fire over the past 4 days. But the Houthis, that's another story. And folks, we talk about multiple fronts, right? And we've talked about the second front, the northern front, Hezbollah. There's a third front right now. And it's open, and it just as the northern front was opening wider, not all the way, but opening wider, those battles were increasing in intensity and casualties. Well, let me tell you, the Yemen front is opening. I'm going to break it down for you in a minute. Before I do, 2 quick things. Number one, we've got thousands with us now. If you are just joining us, perhaps you've never watched before, you like what you're hearing, hey, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hard to believe, folks, but we are moving towards 1 million subscribers. Crazy. Only God. I just shake my head and say, Lord, thank you. Thank you for expanding our territory for such a time as this, not for our glory, for our edification. We do this for you and so that people know what's going on. We think you'd rather know than not know in these prophetic Bible times in which we are living. So the more you like it, the more you recommend it, the more YouTube will blast it out so more people can get educated. And who knows, they might even come to the Lord. And that would be very nice. This is a news channel from a biblical perspective, unapologetically and proudly so. Second thing I want to mention along those lines, I'm talking about northern Israel and southern Israel. We're about to move on to Yemen, and there's a U.S. angle there too. But some 300,000 Israelis, 300,000 as Hanukkah's coming up, holidays, have been displaced from their homes since October 7th. Where are they? They're in shelters. They're all over the place. And they've lost their homes essentially for the past 7 weeks. And who knows when they'll go back. So the Israeli economy right now, folks, is struggling. Israel's at war. And 300,000 reservists have been called up. People left their jobs. The country right now, it's a very, very tough time. This is a time, if you want to fulfill that biblical mandate to bless Israel and the Jewish people as laid out in Genesis 12:3, it's a good time to do it. And when you can find out who your true friends are when the going gets tough. The going's tough right now in Israel. So this is a good time. I've talked about Meir Panim, our good friends there. I also want to mention another great Israeli company that we work with called Artza. This is the perfect way to support the Israeli economy. Artza boxes, and you see them there on your screen. They are beautiful, handcrafted products and goods made in the Holy Land. Places like Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Nazareth, the Galilee. Israeli artisans, Israeli small businesses are making these incredible products, and Artza is putting them all together in these beautiful gift boxes, and they'll send it to your doorstep. Two things here. Number one, you're supporting an Israeli company. It's artzabox.com. Artzabox, A-R-T-Z-A, artzabox.com. Two things here. Number one, you're supporting an Israeli company. You're blessing Israel through blessing Israel's economy at a time when it needs it, blessing a small business. Number two, if you've never been to the Holy Land, I've been many times. It may be on your bucket list. It should be, especially now. It's tough to get to Israel during wartime, of course. This will get you pretty darn close. These are products. It's an authentic taste, smells, everything else of Israel, made in Israel by Israeli hands, Israeli small businesses and artisans throughout the country. I only support and promote companies that I am in agreement with and I agree with their mission. Artza, 110%. I've been working with them. If you've been a longtime viewer, you know Mayor Panim, and certainly you know Artza. Since July 2020, we've been working with our good friends at Artza. They're based in Israel. And by the way, the owner of the company is in the Israeli reserves as we speak. So he's literally fighting the good fight. Support him, support the good people at Artza. And there's a discount code. It's a Christmas box, by the way. It's artzabox.com. The special Christmas box, the discount code is Watchman18. That's M-A-N, Watchman18. Go to artzabox.com, type in Watchman18 for an 18% discount just in time for Hanukkah and Christmas shopping. And hey, today's Cyber Monday here in the U.S. Great day to take advantage of those deals for your loved ones with the holidays upon us. Artzabox.com. Check it out. Help and bless Israel's economy. This is a company I truly believe in. They are good, good folks. God bless them. Artzabox.com, Watchman18. Okay. Now, the folks that Israeli reserves are fighting against are Iranian proxies, as we've discussed many times here, but sometimes the Houthis in Yemen get overlooked. And I could see why in some respects, in that, look, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, the militias, the Shia militias, they are perched on Israel's borders, quite literally. The Houthis are a different story. They're some 1,000 miles south of Israel in Yemen. And you might say, well, they're far away. Israel doesn't have to worry. Guess what? Since October 7th, the Houthis repeatedly have fired ballistic missiles, rockets, and attack drones in Israel's direction, in the direction in particular of Israel's southernmost city, the resort city of Eilat on the Red Sea. Now, Yemen obviously hugs the Red Sea coast, and thanks to Iranian support, the Houthis have great range on these rockets, missiles, drones. They can reach Israel. Even from 1,000 miles away southward, they can reach Israel. And as I mentioned a minute ago, they've been trying to do that and trying to do that. Israel has not responded that we know of. And Avigdor Lieberman today called the Houthis out and said, we need to do something here. We can't just take it on the chin and try to ignore this. And there's an update from the past 24 hours with a U.S. angle. Let's break that down in a second. But let me just mention, I know Israel doesn't want to open up other fronts. But it's getting to the point with Hezbollah and the Houthis, and Lieberman spoke to this, where Israel's got to do something and send a message. And with the Houthis, in the past few days, we reported this on the newscast last week, the Houthis hijacked a cargo ship in the Red Sea, which they mistakenly thought was an Israeli-owned ship. Israel says it wasn't. There were no Israelis, no Jews on this ship, but the Houthis hijacked the ship, folks. And this has been Iran's MO, right? Attacking shipping, Israeli and Jewish-owned shipping over the past 2-3 years in this tit-for-tat war with Israel on the high seas. So there were no Israelis or Jews on that cargo ship that was seized last week. But yesterday, the Houthis once again were at their old tricks in the Red Sea, on the Red Sea, I should say. They attempted to hijack a ship owned by an Israeli businessman named Ayel Ofer. Now, his shipping has been targeted in the past by other Iranian proxies. I want to pull up the full details for you here. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. This ship was called the Central Park, was the name of this ship. It is managed by Zodiac Maritime. It's a London-based international ship management company owned by Israeli billionaire Eyal Ofer's Zodiac Group. So his shipping has been targeted previously by Iranian proxies folks, and the Houthis targeted it again yesterday. Not by coincidence. It's because it's owned by Israeli. Because remember, last week the Houthis said, look, we're going to attack Israel every day until the war stops in Gaza. So look, Hezbollah has held its fire, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, but not the Houthis. And they said, we're going to continue to try to hijack Israeli or Jewish-owned ships. So they followed through on that threat yesterday, or at least they tried to. A distress call came through that the ship was under attack by pirates from Yemen, linked to the Houthis, no doubt. And thankfully, folks, they were not successful because a U.S. Navy destroyer responded. And they were able, as I'm just reading this straight from my phone, that's why I'm looking down, but I want to have the details straight for you. 5 armed individuals left this ship, the Central Park, and tried to flee on a small boat, but a U.S. destroyer chased them down in the Red Sea and forced them to surrender. The crew of the ship was safe, but the terrorists, the attempted ship hijackers, were apprehended. Now, the Pentagon's saying these were actually initial estimates that they were Somali pirates. But pretty interesting, folks, and we know about the history of Somali piracy, but pretty interesting that shortly afterwards, 2 ballistic missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen toward the general location of of that U.S. destroyer and the Central Park, that cargo ship. So the pirates are seized by U.S. forces, and the Houthis launched 2 ballistic missiles. Now, thankfully, no one was killed in this missile attack by the Houthis. But do you see where I'm going with this, folks? This is an increasing threat to Israel's south that needs to be answered, not only by Israel, but the U.S. They're firing on U.S. vessels as well. So my question is, how long does Israel stand by and just kind of take it on the chin? Now, none of these Houthi missiles, rockets, drones, etc., that we know of have been successful in terms of hitting Israel. They've all been shot down by either U.S. vessels or by Israel missile defense systems and U.S. and Israeli vessels. That's a good thing, but the Houthis have shown no sign of letting up. And Israel can only ignore this, I believe, for so long. About a week ago, Israel's Air Force commander said, look, we have plans to hit all of Israel's enemies, including the Houthis. I'm not advocating for a third front to open and for Israel to go all in Yemen. The Houthis aren't what Hamas is and Hezbollah is. They are ideologically, but they don't have the capabilities that Hamas and Hezbollah do. But they have capabilities nonetheless that can cause a lot of damage. And Israel eventually, in some way, is going to have to respond. I don't know when that's going to be. I know the battle with Hezbollah is coming, but eventually the Houthis, there will be a reckoning there. And if just one of these drones or missiles or rockets gets through that were fired by the Houthis and successfully causes damage in Israel, that's a game changer. Israel has literally dodged bullets so far with the Houthis, but that's not going to last forever. It seems, as the Houthis continue a daily barrage. Last thing to mention, and I do notice that my background changed. Wow, someone just pointed that out. I guess we had our background here on a timer, and it just changed. At least it looks kind of cool, right? Behind me. It doesn't look too weird, kind of like a techie look behind me now. But let's see here. The last thing I want to mention, along these lines, we're talking the maritime battle with Iran and its proxies. Iran has added a sophisticated warship to its Caspian Sea fleet. Iran's Navy today added a destroyer capable of launching cruise missiles to its Caspian Sea fleet. Now, a lot of times you got to take these Iranian claims with a grain of salt. It seems like once a week, and we're talking about this consistently here in the newscast, that Iran's making some new announcement. There's some new cruise missile. Then they say they have hypersonic missiles. Then they say they launched a satellite into space. So there's a lot of claims that come from Tehran It's hard to verify all of them, but know this, that the intent is there. And certainly Iranian scientists, with help from the likes of Russia, China, and others, even North Korea, are working overtime to have those capabilities. That is the state of play right now. The Iranian regime, very, very active. And that's not a good thing, of course. But you know what? The God of Israel, who I mentioned earlier, yeah, remember him? He neither slumbers nor sleeps. At the end, when the dust settles, at the end of the day, when the dust settles from this current round with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, Israel will be in good shape. It's not going to be easy getting there, but we've read to the back of the book. We know how this all ends. Again, the time of Jacob's trouble is coming. It's not going to be easy going for Israel, anything but God is with his land and his people. Keep it all in prayer. Pray for wisdom, discernment, again, for Israel's leaders. Pray for the hostages, their families. Hey, if you're an intercessor, a prayer warrior, you're very busy right now, and prayer works. Don't forget it. Thanks so much for joining us here today on The Watchman. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.